My favorite literary characters of all time are vampires. Even outside of fiction, the myths and lore have always called out to me. Minus the most recent sparkling versions, I enjoy all iterations of the legends, most especially the reported and alleged real-life vampires. I've come across a few regional accounts, and I've been waiting for the right legend to present here. I've looked up some on the Richmond vampire out of Virginia, but I haven't found much outside the legend part of the story. The last month or so, my day job has had me move to the third shift and pulling doubles, and as much as I appreciate all of you suffering through some shorter tales because of that, I didn't want to put together another short one. I had toyed around with the idea of the Casket Girls, but Cassie over at the channel Tales Told in the Dark beat me to it, and she did a wonderful telling of that legend. I'll link that one in the description for you to check out. Stop by her channel and check it out, and tell Cassie I said hey. But while researching the story of the Casket Girls, I came across the story of Jacques St Germain, a local vampire legend from New Orleans. The vampire subculture in New Orleans have always fit perfectly. Even in the 1990s, my research on vampires always led me back to New Orleans. But when I started researching the legend of Jacques St Germain, I wasn't prepared for everything that I would find. This story ties in a lot of my previous research interest, and I thought this would be the perfect presentation to get me back on track. This one's all over the place. For those of you with some esoteric knowledge, I think you'll enjoy this one. For those of you that haven't hit that rabbit trail yet, you'll just have to bear with me here. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture. Some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. New Orleans. Many southern cities have a dark side, lurking just beneath the surface. That's always been my fascination, both in true life and in fiction. A dark, magical world within our own, barely outside the view of day-to-day life. Sometimes, it only takes a slight scratch of the surface to expose parts of this world. Places like New Orleans, though, it's not really hidden. Sometimes that world doesn't even bother staying away from the beaten path. It's right there in front of you, screaming, "Look at me." One can get their fill of dark legends and strange stories all day, every day from New Orleans. That's all well and good, but there's still layers that need to be peeled back for those brave enough. Today's legend revolves around a man known as Jacques St Germain. His story begins in 1902. Well, as far as New Orleans is concerned anyway. According to legend, St Germain came to New Orleans from France in 1902. He claimed to be the descendant of the Count of St Germain, an 18th century figure of European high society, and that's about all we know. Jacques St Germain was a strange, enigmatic figure that quickly climbed the social ladder in New Orleans by entertaining the city's high society with lavish dinner parties. Of course, people never missed the opportunity to hobnob with the snobs, but it never went without notice that Jacques St Germain never joined in with the dinners. Oh, he was present, of course. but they say he never ate or drank anything with them. Naturally, rumors began to buzz about him in the aristocratic circles. Not to mention, no one had a clue as to what St. Germain did for a living or where his wealth came from. On top of this, St. Germain revealed a reputation of being a womanizer. They say he went into the French Quarter nightly to meet up with young women. On one particular night, St. Germain brought home a young woman from a bar, and it wasn't long before screams could be heard coming from his residence. As bystanders came to check things out, the woman jumped from the second story of the house. She survived, telling those on the street that St. Germain had attacked her, evident to those nearby by a gaping bite wound on her neck. Local police quickly responded and searched the home, but Jacques St Germain was nowhere to be found. In the search, the police found bloodstains, along with wine bottles filled with human blood. The unidentified woman later died at nearby Charity Hospital. Oddly enough, the legend seems to stop right there. The story has survived all this time within New Orleans, and even today there have been sightings and attacks that locals claim was St. Germain himself. Sightings have cropped up through the history of New Orleans, even to modern times. Local bars have created several drinks inspired by him, and his former residence on Royal Street has even become a tourist attraction. Now, it would be easy enough for random attacks to be blamed on a legendary vampire. Maybe those people never saw their attacker. Maybe they are covering for someone for whatever reason. But what if the accounts are true? Yeah, I'm just weird enough to entertain that idea. Let's start at face value. Either Jacques St Germain was a vampire, or he wasn't. The legend of the initial attack could have been done by some strange, eccentric individual putting on an act, pretending or even wanting to be a vampire. Easy enough to explain, right? Here's my train of thought, though. It seems that St. Germain did have a good amount of wealth and wasn't shy about flaunting it around. And if he was constantly entertaining high society, then that means he wanted to be part of that group. Then why be so secretive about your background? This character strikes me as one who would like to brag about his wealth and how he came about it. Even if it were inherited, you'd think St. Germain would be more like, I'm the son and grandson of so-and-so, not be like, I'm the descendant of someone from 200 years ago. Seems you'd want your pedigree to be easily traced. Unless you were immortal, right? Then your entire pedigree would be all made up. You wouldn't want people finding that out. So let's see. If you never aged, you'd have to reinvent your identity, every 20 or 30 years to keep up appearances? Or else people would notice you weren't aging at all. You can't very well do business with someone for 70 years and still look 30 years old. If you've ever seen the movie Highlander, then that's the concept I'm thinking. So with that in mind, you'd have to be extremely creative with your supposed family lineage. That's a lot of material to fake and keep straight in your mind. Unless you just use one figure from 200 years ago, right? That's a lot less to keep up with. So let's say Jacques St Germain keeps things super secretive for that reason. Makes a little more sense. But then he name drops one name, the Count of St Germain. Could he really be a descendant of the Count of St Germain? Or even more bizarre, could they be one and the same? An immortal vampire that has moved around throughout the centuries. I will admit, that's a big stretch, until I looked into the Count of St Germain himself. Buckle up. The origins of the Count of St Germain are unknown. As a matter of fact, so is his real name. It seems he used multiple names, but which one, if any, were his real names remains unknown. The Marquis of Montefrat, Count Bellamar, Knight Shuning, Count Weldon, Count Saltykov, Manuel Doria, Graf Saragi, and Prince Radgutski are just a few names that the Count of St Germain were known to have used. Don't even point it out. I know I probably butchered a lot of those names. Most accounts have him being known as the Count of St Germain by the early 1740s. Even his birth year isn't known. It's listed as anywhere between 1691 and 1712, and it goes without saying that not much is known about his early life. What is known is statements from St. Germain himself, and a lot of speculation from others. Later in life, the Count of St. Germain claimed to be the son of Francis II, the Prince of Transylvania. The will of Francis II mentions a Leopold George, his eldest son. Leopold George was thought to have died at the age of 4, but some speculate that his death was faked to protect the family line against the persecution from the Habsburg dynasty. When the Count of St. Germain arrived in Germany in 1779, he told Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel that he was 88 years old. If he really was the son of Francis II, that would put his birth in 1691, when Francis II was 15 years old. All of this information can't be proven, but if true, it would explain the Count of St. Germain's wealth. St. Germain allegedly went to school in Italy and was the student of Gian Gaston, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. Not much more is known until his adult life, where he deliberately came up with elaborate ways to conceal his actual name and origins. It seems each time he traveled, he came up with a different name and cover story. Some claim the Count's real name was Simon Wolf. Others say he was a Spanish Jesuit named Amar. Others still claim his true title was Marquis de Betmar from Portugal. Most historians, though, think that the most likely origin is that he was the son of an Italian princess, claiming his birth was in Savoy around 1710. They even claim that his father was a tax collector by the name of Rotundo. It's documented that the Count of St. Germain contributed songs to an opera at the Haymarket Theatre in London every Saturday except one, between February 9th and April 20th, 1745. In December of that same year, Horace Walpole mentions the Count as being arrested in London on suspicion of espionage during the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745, but that he was released without charges. Walpole writes, "The other day they seized an odd man who goes by the name of Count St. Germain. He has been here these 2 years and will not tell who he is or whence, but professes that he does not go by his real name. He sings, plays the violin wonderfully, composes, is mad, and not very sensible. He is called an Italian, a Spaniard, a Pole, somebody that married a great fortune in Mexico and ran away with her jewels to Constantinople, a priest, a fiddler, a vast nobleman, The Prince of Wales has had an unsatiated curiosity about him, but in vain. However, nothing has been made out against him. He is released, and what convinces me that he is not a gentleman stays here, and talks of his being taken up for a spy. In April and May of 1749, the Count gave 2 private musical performances for Lady Jemima York in London. She tells how she was, quote, very much entertained by him the whole time. I mean, the oddness of his manner is impossible not to laugh at. Otherwise, you know he's very sensible and well bred in conversation. She goes on to write, he is an odd creature, and the more I see him, the more curious I am to know something about him. He is everything with everybody. He talks ingeniously with Mr. Ray, philosophy with Lord Willoughby, and is gallant with Miss York, Miss Carpenter, and all the young ladies. Walpole later reports that St. Germain spoke Italian and French with ease, but that it was obvious that neither was his first language. He goes on to point out that St. Germain could understand Polish, and quickly learned to understand English, but that either Spanish or Portuguese seemed to be his natural language. Walpole finished his description of the Count by saying he was, quote, a man of quality who had been in or designed for the church. He was too great a musician not to have been famous. End quote. Walpole says St. Germain was pale, with black hair and a beard. He later writes, he dressed magnificently and had several jewels. The Count of St. Germain shows up in France in 1748, and a year later was employed by King Louis XV for diplomatic missions. Most of the Count's time spent in France is given to us by Giacomo Casanova, the famous writer and adventurer, not to mention the world's best-known lover. In 1757, Casanova writes, the most enjoyable dinner I had was with Madame de Robert Jergy, who came with the famous adventurer known by the name of the Count of St. Germain. This individual, instead of eating, talked from the beginning of the meal to the end, and I followed his example in one respect, as I did not eat, but listened to him with great attention. It may safely be said that as a conversationalist, he was unequaled. St. Germain gave himself out for a marvel, and always aimed at exciting amazement, which he often succeeded in doing. He was a scholar, linguist, musician, and chemist, good-looking, a perfect ladies' man. For a while he gave them paints and cosmetics. He flattered them, not that he would make them young again, which he modestly confessed was beyond him, but that their beauty would be preserved by means of a wash which, he said, cost him a lot of money, but he gave it away freely. He had contrived to gain the favor of Madame de Pompadour, who had spoken about him to the king, for whom he had made a laboratory, in which the monarch, a martyr to boredom, tried to find a little pleasure or distraction, at all events, by making dyes. The king had given him a suite of rooms at Chambord, and 100,000 francs for the construction of a laboratory, and according to St. Germain, the dyes discovered by the king would have a materially beneficial influence on the quality of French fabrics. This extraordinary man, intended by nature to be king of impostors and quacks, would say in an easy, assured manner that he was 300 years old, and that he knew the secret of universal medicine, that he possessed a mastery over nature, that he could melt diamonds, professing himself capable of forming, out of 10 or 12 small diamonds, one large one of the finest water without any loss of weight. All this, he said, was a mere trifle to him. Notwithstanding his boastings, his barefaced lies, and his manifold eccentricities, I cannot say I thought him offensive. In spite of my knowledge of what he was, and in spite of my own feelings, I thought him an astonishing man, as he was always astonishing me. The Count of St Germain later traveled to the Netherlands in March of 1760, during the height of the 7 Years' War. He stayed with bankers Adrian and Thomas Hope, pretending he came to borrow money for King Louis XV of France, with a bag of diamonds as collateral. While in the Netherlands, St Germain helped Bertrand Philippe start a porcelain factory, where St Germain became the furnace and color specialist. The Count stayed in high society, which ultimately led to his involvement in politics of the time. He even tried to start peace negotiations between Britain and France with the help of Duke Louis Ernest. The British believed that St Germain had French backing still, but would not ultimately entertain his request without proper credentials from King Louis XV himself. Although the French king was familiar with St Germain and had previously employed him for this exact sort of thing, the king's council at the time convinced King Louis to disavow St Germain and demand his arrest. The Dutch regarded this move as merely political and felt that Holland should not be involved at all. But refusing to extradite St Germain would be considered a bad political move, and there was fear that a refusal would bring the Dutch into conflict. As the government stalled, Count Bentinck de Roon arranged for St Germain to flee to Britain with the help of British Ambassador General Joseph Yorke. St Germain was given a blank passport, allowing St Germain to travel to London in May of 1760 under yet another assumed name. There are other writings that help map out the Count's travels. Various documents have him appearing in St. Petersburg, Berlin, Vienna, and Milan in 1762, Venice in 1769, and Nuremberg in 1772. St. Germain's last recorded location was to Altona, Germany, at the request of Prince Charles of Hesse Castle, who had a big interest in mysticism, being in several secret societies himself. The Count showed Prince Charles several of the gemstones he traveled with, and also convinced Prince Charles that he had invented a new method of coloring fabrics. The prince gave St. Germain an abandoned factory in Eckernford that the prince had bought especially for the Count, and supplied the factory with anything and everything the Count needed. The Count was also given a private residence, where a separate laboratory was set up for alchemy experiments. The two continued to meet often over the years, and it's said the two cooperated in creating gemstones and jewelry. The prince later writes that he was the only person that St. Germain would confide in. According to the prince, St. Germain was the son of Francis II, the Prince of Transylvania. The Count of St. Germain is said to have died in his residence on February 27, 1784, while Prince Charles was away. The death is recorded in the register of St. Nikolai Church in Eckernford, Germany. He was buried on March 2nd in a private grave. On April 3rd, the mayor and city council decided to auction off the Count's belongings since no one had appeared to claim them. The items listed were a packet of paid bills and receipts, 82 wretch haulers and 13 shillings in cash, and various items of clothing. There was no mention of personal items, his violin, or no letters or personal writings. Also missing were St. Germain's diamonds, jewels, and gold. The story of the Count of St Germain continues on, though. The best-known biography of St Germain is by Isabel Cooper Oakley, titled The Count of St Germain, published in 1912. It contains letters, diaries, and private records written by French high society members that knew him. Another short biography of St Germain can be found in The History of Magic, written in 1913 by Eliphas Levi, known for the occult revival in 1800s France, as well as the person who gives us the first known image of Baphomet. Occultist Manly P. Hall also references a biography of St. Germain written by E. M. Odinger. Raymond Bernard's books, The Great Secret, claims that St. Germain's real identity is Francis Bacon, another well-known occultist, and the illegitimate child of Queen Elizabeth I. The Count of St. Germain is a central figure in a series of books written by Guy Ballard under the pen name Godfrey Ray King. In these books, Ballard claims that the books were dictated to him by St. Germain himself over 100 years after St. Germain's death. Ballard says that St. Germain is an ascended master who is still assisting humanity. The series, although not claimed, are in direct harmony with Theosophy, the religious belief primarily started by occultist and mystic Helena Blavatsky. In fact, many of the early founders of Theosophy claim to have met the Count of St. Germain personally in the late 19th or early 20th centuries. Annie Besant claimed to have met St. Germain in 1896. C.W. Ledbetter claimed to have met St. Germain in Rome in 1926. Guy Ballard claimed to have met St. Germain on Mount Shasta in California in August of 1930. He said this meeting initiated his experiences with other ascended masters around the world. In 1935, clairvoyant Edgar Casey, while in a trance, was asked if St. Germain was present. Casey's reply was, "When needed." Spiritual teacher David Christopher Lewis says that St. Germain visited him in his home on June 10, 2004, and continues to do so. Poet Miroslav Zemer claims to have met St. Germain in the mountains of Slovakia in 2011. Musician David Narozny says he met St. Germain in the Czech Republic on May 23, 2014. Mystic author Dorothy Leon claims several encounters with St. Germain and has since become an avid disciple of his. Another spiritual teacher, Peter Mount Shasta, claims to have met St. Germain in the Muir Woods in California many times, some of which are documented in his own books. These are just a few of the more well-known followers of Theosophy to make these claims. There are many groups that honor St. Germain as a supernatural being, an ascended master, or a master of ancient wisdom. In this school of thought, St. Germain is believed to have the ability to teleport, levitate, walk through walls, and to inspire people by telepathy. The Theosophical Society considers St. Germain to be a Mahatma, a master of ancient wisdom. Helena Blavatsky herself said that St. Germain was one of her, quote, masters of wisdom, and hinted that the Count had given her secret documents. Other esoteric groups credit the Count of St. Germain with inspiring our own founding fathers to draft the Declaration of Independence, as well as the U.S. Constitution. The design of the Great Seal of the United States is said by these groups to have been designed by St. Germain himself. Alice Bailey, who many consider to be the mother of the modern New Age movement, viewed St. Germain as a member of the Great White Brotherhood of Ascended Masters. She claimed that St. Germain would return with other Ascended Masters in physical form sometime after the year 2025. She claimed that St. Germain is the, quote, manager of the Executive Council of Christ, end quote, a subgroup of the Masters of the Ancient Wisdom, tasked with preparing the way for the second coming of Christ. In short recap, the Theosophical Society believes that the Count of St. Germain was all of the following: ruler of the City of the Sun, a Golden Age civilization that existed 70,000 years ago in the Sahara Desert; High Priest of Atlantis, 13,000 years ago; Samuel, the 11th century BC prophet of Israel; Hesiod, the Greek poet from 700 BC; Plato, the philosopher and student of Pythagoras, another occultist, might I add; Saint Joseph, husband of Mary and human guardian of Jesus; Saint Alban, first martyr of Britain in the 3rd or 4th century; Proclus, the last major Greek philosopher; Merlin, magician and counselor to King Arthur; 13th century English philosopher Roger Bacon; explorer Christopher Columbus; and finally, Francis Bacon. According to the Ascended Master teachings, Francis Bacon faked his own death on April 9th, 1626, and even attended his own funeral in disguise. He then traveled to Transylvania. Finally, on May 1st, 1684, they believe Francis Bacon attained physical ascension, which would be gaining immortality and eternal youth, at which time he took on the name of St. Germain. Much of St. Germain's musical works are still available today. There are 6 sonatas, 7 violin solos, 4 English songs, and 42 Italian works known today, all attributed to the Count of St. Germain. There are 2 books that are said to have been written by the Count of St. Germain himself: the Most Holy Trina Sophia and the Triangular Book of St. Germain. The first book, the Most Holy Trina Sophia, is an illustrated 18th century manuscript that describes a spiritual initiation, or the process of alchemy. I say "or" because you get different interpretations of the symbolic terms throughout the book, depending on who you ask. The book has been published several times throughout the years. It was largely brought to attention in 1933, when published by the Masonic occultist Manly P. Hall. The other book, the Triangular Book of St. Germain, has no published title. It gets its name from the original manuscript that was in the shape of a triangle. There are 2 known original copies of the manuscript, both residing in the Getty Research Library under the Manly P. Hall collection of alchemical manuscripts. It was finally translated in 2011 and published as the Triangular Book of St. Germain in 2015. This book describes magical rituals, mostly rituals to gain wealth and extend your life. You see, I warned you this one would be all over the place. Or at least it seems to be. If you are like me and recognize some of these names, then the story makes a little more sense. I knew I was in for a wild ride with this one as soon as I saw mention of Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. So, Ascended Master, Supernatural Being, Immortal, Vampire, Potato, tomato, you see where I'm going. Should we add Jacques St Germain of New Orleans to the Theosophical Society's list of incarnations? Hell, why not? They got everyone else. Might as well take this one too. He claimed it. Sometimes people are who they tell you they are. With as crazy as the rest of this story is, why wouldn't Jacques St Germain be the Count of St Germain? Theosophy, alchemy, immortality, vampirism. You just can't shock me with this story anymore. Except maybe the Joseph and Jesus connections. You can have the Vampire of New Orleans connection, but you can't have everything. Don't be so greedy. Alice Bailey said sometime after 2025, right? If that's the case, that's just around the corner. Better hurry up and pick a side.